Welcome to the OP Overwatch Podcast, a podcast focused on Overwatch strategy, tactics, characters, and general discussion. I'm your host, Jam, and I am joined by my co-host, Jeff. How are you, Jeff?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. We're going to continue our character breakdown. We spoke about Tracer on the last episode, and we're going to move on to Reaper and Genji for this episode in our grouping of what we consider the flanker attack characters. So we'll go ahead and move into Reaper right now.
If it lives, I can kill it.
So Reaper is an interesting character. Mostly because right on the surface, he's very, very, very simple. I mean, he's a hooded figure with two shotguns and literally plays exactly how you'd expect him to. He's got to get in close. He's got to do as much damage as possible in a short amount of time, and he's very, very good at doing that. How's your experience been with Reaper so far as you've been playing the game?
Well, I like Reaper. I think he's definitely one of the easier characters to pick up and do well with right away. He's as you said, he plays exactly how you'd expect. People are familiar with a shotgun character from previous shooters, I'm sure. So I mean, he's strong, and he kind of does what you'd expect him to do. His moves aren't really like quick twitch moves that you have to really get your muscle memory going for. You've got time to think, okay, I'm going to shadow step over there, and then you teleport up to the rafters. Or you've got a pretty good health pool, so you can see that you're taking damage and you're going to die, and then you use your wraith form and get out of there. So I feel like his abilities are fairly straightforward, and he doesn't do anything really weird or unique in his movement. So yeah, he's easy to pick up and play. For this type of flanker role, I feel like I prefer a Tracer over him, but that's just personal preference. He's definitely a very strong and viable character.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you there. I think that the interesting thing about Reaper is even though he does fall under the attack class and what we've been considering the flanker type attack class, where they kind of excel at moving in close and catching your enemies by surprise, Reaper seems, at least to me, very simple on the surface, but for a character that's not as mobile as a character like Tracer, he has a lot of interesting abilities that he can use to kind of counteract the fact that he doesn't have a great way of popping in and out of battle. His ability to basically come in, do massive damage, and then the second he's in danger, go into his wraith form, which he basically becomes a shadow for a short period of time, and he can move around. I actually believe he moves a little faster, too, than his normal walking speed when he's in this form. And for a few seconds, he just can't be touched. He can't be hit, which is really, really useful, I think, in any game. You're taking damage, all of a sudden, for a few seconds, you can't take any damage. But what's interesting about this is not only are you able to move while in this form, but you can also pick up health with him. And I feel that is so important with this character because, like most of the close-range flanker attack characters, they don't have a lot of health, so anything you can do to mitigate that, whether it be through picking up health items, whether it be through avoiding attacks, is going to be extremely important. So just to go in, blast off your shotguns, and just walk away normally isn't going to be the most effective way to play him. I find that using his wraith form to mitigate damage once the attention is on you and either get away or move to a health pack is extremely important with him.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, using that cooldown at the right time it's very much a lifesaver. I do think he's a little bit, maybe tanky isn't the right word, but compared to the other two characters we've kind of broken into this subgroup, Tracer and Genji, Reaper does have more health, and also, I mean, with his the souls that he picks up, he's able to heal himself to some degree. So, for that reason, I do think that he is more equipped to mix it up and be in the middle of a fray than, Tracer, who's just going to get hit with a stray explosive and die. I also think that Reaper is meant to be more of a killer than Tracer, who's more of a disruptor. Reaper is not playing around with Widowmaker or a Bastion. I mean, if he uses his teleport and gets in behind them, it's a shotgun to the back of the head, and it's game over. So there's not going to be any blinking away or live to fight another day. I mean, Reaper is very much kill or be killed, in my opinion.
Yeah, and not only against those attack characters, but as a flanker, Reaper is absolutely devastating to tanks as well. I mean, he can fire 8 shots out of his shotguns before he has to reload, in which, he throws his guns away and then picks out new guns.
Reload is a loosely used term.
Reloading takes too much time. Just carry hundreds of guns on you, and it's going to be way more efficient. But when he comes in from the side, I mean, if you could pop 2 or 3 shots on a tank, like on a Roadhog or on a Winston, before they even notice you're coming at them, you're pretty much in an advantageous situation where you can potentially take out a high HP character, and then after that, focus on some of the other characters, whether it be some of the defensive characters or other offensive characters as well, or even some of the supports to kind of get rid of their heal. In fact, I find a lot of the time if you can move in and get rid of the healer first, that completely disrupts the build of your opponent's team, depending on how they play. But Reaper is definitely a force to be reckoned with. And depending on how you use him, I feel using his other abilities, his Wraith Form, his Shadow Step, which has always, to me, surprising range. The amount of distance he can cover, it seems initially with his Shadow Step that, the teleportation, he has an animation he goes through, and then he appears, and then he's not even instantly attacking. It still takes a little while. However, the distance you can cover with the Shadow Step seems to make up for the fact that it takes a while to do it, because you can literally get to a spot much quicker, and in a lot of cases at a higher altitude and a different level of the map you're playing on, quicker than you could just running there. And when you're trying to get the jump on a point or on a payload area, that ability is just priceless for him. It's just so useful, and with the amount of damage he can do.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very much meant to be a mobility tool more than a combat tool, because of the time it takes to aim it and then to use it where he channels it and he's vulnerable. It's really not something you want to use if you're fighting somebody to get away. But I have had some pretty successful matches with Reaper where I like to pick him on maps where they're kind of longer maps where you can really use that to get ahead, and I've found it to be pretty effective to use that to get in behind, either up on the rafters with a Widowmaker, or just to get behind the other team. And you can usually come in, kill at least 1, maybe 2 people before they're all able to turn and engage you, and at that point, you just Wraith form and just kind of stroll back to your team that's able to push forward now that the other team has turned their back to your whole team and down several players.
Yeah, he's definitely good on his own against a team, but I do agree with you in that you most definitely want to kind of lean on your team, whether it be your tank or your healer, to really help finish off the rest of the team. There's definitely some characters, depending on how you play them, where you can take out the majority of not an entire team, and Reaper is definitely one of those characters. But it's a risky way to play, and it's good to be able to, in any situation, come in, kill as many as you can, and get out with taking as little damage as possible. Speaking of mitigating damage, not only can he use his Wraith form to not take damage, but on top of the regular health items that everybody gets up, Reaper has an interesting effect where when he kills characters, he can actually pick up these sort of soul orbs, which also heal him as well. I didn't notice that in the beta. I know it was definitely in there, but it's one of those little subtle things that, once again, here's a character who's not a tank, not a healer, but has a way of maintaining his health in a solo situation. So when you combine that with the team aspect, it's super effective.
Oh, yeah. If you're doing pretty well with Reaper, you're usually going to register on the healing meter as well at the end of the game. Because, the more kills you get, the more he's healing himself. And those are definitely a big deal, especially when you're off on the flank, kind of away from your healer. Reaper is able to sustain on his own for a good period of time.
For sure. And you can't talk about Reaper and not mention his ultimate, Death Blossom. This is arguably, in my opinion, one of the best ultimates in the game. If you're it's so many times in Overwatch, you're in a situation where a team is defending a point, or they're defending the payload. Everyone's close together. You're keeping your healers, your tanks, everyone real close together to kind of push away other attackers. And between his Wraith form, his Shadow Step, and then Death Blossom, which I can only explain as an Equilibrium style massacre, where he just comes in and uses both shotguns and just 360-degree absolutely decimates anyone around him. It is definitely a force to be reckoned with, and it's one of my favorite ways to get the play of the game in any of the Overwatch matches. He can just do so much damage in a short amount of time, and you can hold on to that ultimate for just the perfect moment to use it, and sometimes make that game-winning play.
Yeah, Reaper, his ultimate is fantastic. But, the downside to it, he is very exposed when he does it. So just like the character playstyle in general, you really have to pick your spots and get in behind them to make the most use of it. I think if you can time it where maybe your team is about to make a push and the other team has all eyes forward, and you can just drop down, or come in behind them and fire it off, and the whole other team's going to be wiped out before they even know what happened.
Yeah, definitely don't come into your ultimate, your Death Blossom, thinking that you're invincible, because even though he does a lot of damage, and it's the same thing with a character like Pharah as well, when you use these ultimates, you are still vulnerable to attack. So if you're going to be blatantly obvious about it, like if you're going to make it happen, you better get it quick, and you better get as many people as possible, because you can absolutely take damage while you're doing it, and Reaper will go down fast if you don't catch them by surprise.
So now that we've had some time after launch to dive into these characters, and Reaper specifically, how do you find the matchups going with him? Who do you think that Reaper is pretty well equipped to deal with, and who gives you trouble when you're playing Reaper?
Well, I think naturally, as a short-range character that Reaper is, it's interesting because he has his ability to not take damage with the Wraith form. He can cover a long distance with Shadow Step, but ultimately, he's still just a guy with two shotguns. So if you're facing, in the cases I have, like a Widowmaker or a Bastion, if you're not right up in their face, you're going to go down. I mean, you better be able to use your abilities to get out of there quickly, to not take damage, use cover, use other teammates, as a distraction. I find for me, Reaper is best used when you're kind of coming in afterwards. You're not the main focus of the attack. You definitely should be catching people by surprise. So I feel like anybody who excels in long range or high damage over a short amount of time at even a medium range, he's not going to do well against. And I've definitely had issues going against some Bastions and Widowmakers with him.
See, I sort of, I understand what you're saying. I do kind of disagree, though. I don't think that Reaper's playstyle lends itself to, charging at a Widowmaker or a Bastion. But, if you're able to take an alternate route or Shadow Step from a distance and get the jump on them, I think those are the type of characters that you're able to get the attack and the surprise on most often. The other character that it's maybe not a surprise, but you wouldn't always expect it. Winston is no match for Reaper because he has no way to spike damage back. So even though Winston has more health, Reaper is just going to devastate him up close, and Winston's shield is no good because Reaper's going to be close enough to be in the shield. So Winston's should be terrified of a Reaper. But I do think that when I've been playing Reaper, some characters that have really given me trouble, Symmetra. The turrets are a bit of an issue, but the shotgun blast makes it easy to take those out. But the problem with Symmetra for Reaper is her left click that locks on allows her to just jump around like a maniac. It's really hard to get your crosshairs on her, and that thing just charges up and wipes you out in 3 seconds. Mei, obviously if Reaper's close enough to shoot Mei, then he's also close enough to get frozen. And Pharah is just going to take off and rain fire down on you. So Reaper has no answers for Pharah.
Yeah, it's very situational. It's interesting. I think definitely with Pharah, anyone who can get the height and basically get out of range and still be effective in attacking is going to excel against Reaper. But yeah, I agree with you. Even with Winston, your options with Winston, as far as I can see, if you're fighting a Reaper, is to shift jump out of there as quickly as possible and get out of range where he can do massive damage. Or if you have your ult, Primal Rage, and hope to God you can hit him, out of the way. And still, even with 1,000 health with Primal Rage, Reaper can do a lot of damage if he's close to you. So I completely agree there. And yeah, as far as the, fighting Widowmaker and Bastion, I think if you're playing in a way that you catch them off guard, you catch them by the surprise, yes, he's an excellent counter to them. But once again, that's one of the interesting things about this game. It's really your ability to kind of adapt, adjust your playstyle accordingly. And it's extremely situational. It's just making sure that you can approach in a way that's going to be most effective for your character.
Yeah, well, that actually brings up another point that I don't know if we've stressed this yet, but in the section here where we're talking about these 3 flanker attacker characters, one of the most important aspects of playing these characters is map knowledge. You need to know the maps and know how to get around, know what the alternate routes are, because these are not the characters you want to just stroll down the middle of the map with. And so, yeah, as you said, Widowmaker or Bastion will give you trouble if you're just going to, walk right at them. Even if with the rest of your team, you're going to be completely ineffective to fight back until you're 10 feet away. So, yeah, I think it's definitely important with Reaper to pick your spots. If there's too much distance, find another way. Find a way to either shadow step somewhere or, find a way to put yourself around a corner where you can just pop out and wipe somebody out. But if you're charging at them down a long hallway, you're asking for it.
Yeah, most definitely. So as far as Reaper goes, do you have any other maybe tips or strategies, or even if, let's say, somebody's just jumping into this game for the first time, similar to how we, said with Tracer, what should you be looking for as a player of Reaper? Like, what kind of player might excel and enjoy him the most?
Well, I think he's definitely a very strong option for starting out and getting the feel for the game. And also, to learn the maps, the only way to do that is to play. So Reaper is going to encourage you to explore maps more so than probably a Reinhardt where you're just walking around with the payload. But, as far as tips, I kind of pick my spots with Reaper. I play him on maps where there's a lot of places to duck into cover and not necessarily the long maps like a Route 66. I would be wary of that just because there's a lot of long sight lines. So, if you play him, as you said, it's all situational. And so if you play him in the right setting, he is one of the best characters in the game. But you can't force that situation if it's not presenting itself. I think that he's tougher than people probably realize at first, between the larger health pool, the cooldown to go immune, and the souls that are healing him. He is able to take a little bit of a beating, and he's able to sustain on his own. So, yeah, he's very viable and very effective. It's certainly a valuable part of a good team comp.
For sure. So, yeah, for Reaper, I would say easy to pick up, definitely tricky to master, but try him out if you want to do a lot of damage. He is a force to be reckoned with.
Life and death balance on the edge of my blade.
All right, so let's get into Genji. Now, I know this is actually a personal favorite of yours. Genji is an interesting character. He has a lot of different options, and he's very much a far jump away from your traditional, first-person shooter type character. He doesn't carry a gun. He's straight up a cyber ninja. How cool is that?
Oh yeah, Genji is my boy. Going into the beta, it was Tracer for me, but Genji's really grown on me since launch. The more I play him, the more I think that he's my favorite character. Tracer blinks all over the place, and her mobility is very obvious. But Genji, his vertical mobility is what continues to impress me. He changes that dimension in a way that most characters don't, and so it really throws other players off. They're not used to having to aim upward to shoot at a target, and so you can really change the dimensions, and all of a sudden you're just firing shurikens down at people, and you're going to have the advantage most of the time because you're the one that knows where you're going. So his mobility is a huge benefit. The ninja stars are probably his greatest strength and his greatest weakness because they are very difficult to get the aim down on. Very unique in this game as far as projectiles, but I mean, there's no damage fall off. So, once you get the hang of him, he's as deadly from Widowmaker range as he is from Reaper range.
I'd have to agree with you. And just to kind of explain, when you say there's no damage fall off, a lot of the characters in the game, their damage, especially the characters with guns, their damage is reduced the farther away you are from the character that you're fighting. So, if you're right up close to somebody, let's say with Tracer, and shooting them, you're going to do more damage than if you were 10, 20 feet away, and then even more so less damage when you're really far away. But with Genji, this isn't the case. You're saying with the shurikens, he's able to do the same amount of damage whether he's 30 feet away or whether he's right in front of you.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you had the right sight line, you could hit someone from all the way across the map with the shurikens. They don't have a trajectory fall off either, like Hanzo's arrows. So yeah, I mean, if you happen to spot a target that's not moving, like a Widowmaker that's scoped or a Bastion, you can rail them from as far away as you can see them. But again, the difficulty with those is they're so unique in how they fire that you're gonna have some bad Genji matches when you start with them. Very difficult to get the hang of those, especially while also making yourself a hard target by double jumping and wall climbing and doing all the other things that Genji has in the repertoire.
So yeah, on the wall climbing, because this is one of these abilities that both Genji and Hanzo have, where they have an extreme advantage, and it wouldn't seem it at first because what's the big deal? You can just climb up a wall and jump up to another level. But most of the characters in the game can't do this, and when you're playing Genji and you're running towards a building and suddenly you climb up and you're on the roof, the benefits of that become abundantly apparent because now you have the height advantage over characters. A lot of people, when they play, they're not looking to look up or even a different altitude. They're literally just looking straight and looking for other people on their level. So right off the bat, you have an advantage on people just on positioning. And then with the shurikens being able to do damage, the same amount of damage at any distance. And then also the shurikens have a right-click ability, which is an alternate fire for the shurikens, where instead of shooting 1, 2, 3 straight in front of you in a direct line, they shoot in a spread shot. Now, have you utilized that at all in some of your recent fights, or do you usually stick with the left click?
Well, his left click is definitely better from range, but the right click is very good up close. So, one of the more powerful combos with Genji is if you can get a target and you left click for the 3 shuriken, straight in a line, then dash in, turn, and you're right on them in melee range, then you can hit them with the right click, and all 3 of those are going to hit because you're so close. So that's a pretty devastating combo that can all have in under a second, pretty much. So both of them definitely have their uses. I would say the left click is probably more commonly used, but not necessarily better. It's all situational.
Definitely. So now let's talk about Genji's deflect, which I would argue is probably his coolest move. I mean, this move is just ridiculous. He's able to use his ability, deflect, to basically pull out his sword, and for a short amount of time, he can reflect oncoming projectiles and send them back towards the opponent. I mean, this is absolutely insane when you're actually putting it to use correctly. What are some of the experiences you've had with his deflect?
Well, that could be a whole podcast on its own, but I mean, it's fantastic. It deflects almost everything in the game. I guess the one you hear about, I think probably for highlights, you see a Widowmaker that headshots themselves because they fire at Genji and he deflects it back at the Widowmaker. I mean, it'll across the board, it'll deflect almost anything. You can deflect High Noon from McCree. You can deflect, one of my favorites actually is Junkrat. He's lobbing grenades at you, and even if the grenade bounces on the ground in front of you, if you hit deflect and run into the path of the grenade, it basically launches it back at him like the original trajectory he fired it at. So yeah, you can really play around with it, but the possibilities are endless. It's an incredibly powerful move, not only to save yourself, but once you really get comfortable using it as an offensive weapon. I mean, I love to see Bastions on the other team, and I love to make sure the Bastion sees me. So they just wipe themselves out before they realize what they're doing.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my favorite moves in the game, and even though I'm not particularly much of a Genji player, I generally gravitate toward some of the other characters. His mobility and just his ability to deflect attacks, to go long range, short range, I mean, it really makes him such an interesting character. I mean, the guy's about as ninja as you can get. It's really great. And speaking of which, we'll move on to his next ability, which is his Swift Strike, which is a melee attack in which he dashes forward and slashes with his katana, even passing through enemies as he's doing it. Now, one thing I love about this move is not only, is it ninja slash with a katana, but it also has use in both offensive capabilities, but also in mobility. Genji can wall climb, and then he can also use his katana Swift Strike to kind of gain a little distance even while he's in midair. Have you used these abilities kind of in tandem with each other a lot in your matches to kind of get around the map and move quickly?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's something that you want to have ready off cooldown to finish somebody. If you get them to like 20% health, you can just dash through them and they're done. And if you're able to kill somebody with it, whether you land the killing blow or whether a teammate does, if you contributed to the kill, it resets the cooldown on that dash. So it's fantastic for that. As far as like general mobility, I try not to use it for that. Genji can usually get most places just with the wall climb and double jump, and I want to make sure that I have it available if I actually encounter somebody unexpectedly. But I mean, it serves a lot of purposes, including an escape route. If you're in a situation that's not looking good, you can dash out a window and catch on the wall, or you can dash to a health pack if you know the map well enough to know where, that you're fighting near one. So yeah, the dash, it's definitely multi-use, and it happens instantly. So it really is good for getting out of tight spots or finishing somebody off before they can run.
Yeah, and I definitely have to say, with the Swift Strike and any ability that allows you to both attack and kind of gain some sort of distance, used as both mobility and offensive, is going to be great. I mean, a lot of the times people are just thinking do damage. But like you said, kind of keeping that ability on hand for just getting out. I mean, if you're getting attacked by 3 people, it doesn't matter if you can kill one. Sometimes the best option is just to get out of the room as quickly as possible. So if you can Swift Strike, wall climb, and then, immediately go into a deflect as you're backing off and kind of taking away some of the hits that could be doing damage to you. I mean, that could be the difference between like dying immediately and having to run all the way across the level, or staying alive long enough to allow your teammates to come and help out. So it's really, really important to be able to keep an eye on your cooldowns, keep an eye on your abilities, and use them based on the situation at hand.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny. I can't even imagine what it looks like to the other team, but anytime I'm on a capture point, like Lijiang Tower comes to mind, where there's windows around the capture point, and the situation goes bad, I just jump out the window. And there's health packs out there, but to them, there's a ledge right there too. So it must look pretty funny. But Genji can get in and out of combat. He can disengage and re-engage very, very quickly, and he can find entry points that most characters don't have access to, like high windows or coming over walls. So he really can dictate terms of how fights start, and he can find exits that other characters might not expect you to take because they can't.
Yeah, I feel like you can't truly be a ninja unless you can stylishly jump out a window. So he's definitely got that under his belt.
Check.
So let's talk about his ultimate, Dragon Blade. This is, along with everything else Genji does, it's a really, really cool ability. Once he's built up his meter and he's able to use his ultimate attack, he is basically able for a short amount of time to pull out his sword and basically go into a crazy rage mode where he can do massive damage with his katana. So this is interesting because it really turns Genji almost from a mid to short range character to instantly you're up in their face doing as much damage as possible.
Yeah, his ultimate is really, really powerful, but even more than an ultimate like Reaper, where it's powerful, but be careful because you're not invulnerable. Genji's, I think a lot of Genji players, for some reason, think they are invulnerable with it, and you routinely see people pop it and just charge the other team. Genji only has 200 health, and that ultimate's not helping with that problem. So I think, in our first episode, I talked about what I expect to be the evolution of ultimates becoming more casual and people using them more often because you can just get it recharged again. I think Genji is the exception to that rule. I think you really need to pick your spots with him because you can get, a 6-player team kill if you do it right, but just using it because it's ready, it's usually going to just get Genji killed. Even if you kill one other person in the process. You got to pick your spots. You got to try and hit them when they don't expect it, and you can just wipe people out if you do it right.
Absolutely. So as far as strategies go for Genji, and I think you're definitely a little more well-versed in this than I am, but I feel with Genji, I'm definitely most successful when I'm not just... and I feel this is true for any of the characters. If you have an ultimate, if you have an ability... don't use it just to use it. This is a team-based game. It's one of those things where you're going to want to sometimes hold on to it and be a little conservative with it until, your entire team's ready and you're ready to do the most amount of damage in the most effective way possible. So for me, I found Genji is really good as a flanking character, kind of like we've discussed with Tracer and Reaper. Getting in there and doing some damage and then getting out quick. And he has the ability to get out quick between his wall climb, his swift strike, and then his ability to reflect to kind of take away some of the damage that might be coming at you after you've hopefully killed one or two or more of the opponent. Really using that to your ability to kind of draw the attention away and kind of open up an opportunity for your team to come in, but also on the flip side, be an absolute force to be reckoned with. I feel if you really get used to his abilities and using them in tandem with each other, he's gonna be ridiculous dangerous. I mean, he's a cyber ninja. He's got shuriken, sword, wall climb. He can absolutely go in and just decimate foes if you use him correctly.
Yeah, that's definitely true. But again, the learning curve with him is pretty significant because, you see plenty of people, especially this week in the game being new and launch, picking Genji and not doing anything because if you can't land the shurikens, the rest of it is all kind of a moot point. But yeah, I mean, once you get the hang of him, it feels like he has more than just two abilities like all the other characters have. It feels like I'm constantly just doing things that other characters can't, that should be on cooldown, but they're not.
So, as far as Genji is concerned, let's talk about character pairings. Who do you feel he's strong against, and who do you feel he's not as strong against? And once again, this is situational. I firmly believe you can fight any character with any character if played correctly, if the situation's right. However, on a general sense, who do you feel is probably going to be somebody that if you're playing Genji, you're more likely to just go right after without a thought in your mind, and who are you going to kind of sit back and be like, oh, I don't know about this person?
Well, I mean, I already mentioned Bastion. I mean, Bastion is the one now where I find myself jumping in front of the rest of my team. Like, I'll take this one, guys, because it's just such a hard counter. I just can't be more excited when I see a Bastion firing at the group. I think Torbjorn is similar. You can wipe out his turrets pretty easily with the deflect. And then Widowmaker and Hanzo are obviously the sniper characters are not going to want anything to do with Genji, wall climbing up to their position. So those are definitely some characters that I feel very good about when I'm playing Genji. Although, truthfully, I mean, it's just as much about map selection, but on the right map, I'll play Genji against any comp. As far as characters that I think Genji is weak against, I mean, the three that immediately come to mind are the three that he can't deflect anything off of, which are Winston with his Tesla cannon, Symmetra with her left click that locks onto you, and then Mei with the freeze. Genji can't deflect those, so I don't want anything to do with those people. And then I guess a personal feeling, I don't like fighting Tracer. It could just be because, the game's been out for less than a week and I'm still getting the hang of this myself. And I have a very hard time hitting Tracer with the shurikens. Tracer's shots are so bursty that they're hard to deflect properly and do damage to Tracer with her own shots. So Tracer's giving me some headaches. A good Tracer player can really give me headaches with Genji. But as far as like a class weakness, I don't know that Tracer is necessarily a counter to Genji.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. For me personally, Genji is definitely, as you mentioned before, has quite the learning curve. It's not as easy to just run in and just amass kills and be extremely effective, but by no means is he an ineffective character. He is absolutely fantastic. Genji, ninja, great abilities, super mobile. I would say he's going to be tricky to master, but very, very effective once you do, and regardless, a whole lot of fun to play.
Definitely. A lot of fun to play, a lot of fun to learn. And once you start getting the hang of the shurikens, it all kind of clicks where you can kind of lead it where you're going without having to think about it. And that's when it really starts to be fun to play him. One last thing I want to add on him, with regards to the deflect, obviously, it starts as a defensive tool. You get better at it. You start picking your spots, and you can start aiming it. But the deflect is also, it's also able to deflect most ultimates. So, like, Zarya's Gravity Well comes to mind. If you see a Reaper that's using their Death Blossom on your team, you can just charge him with Deflect, and Reaper will kill himself with his ultimate. So Deflect makes you pretty brave when you realize that you can deflect most, I mentioned McCree earlier, but his flashbang as well. I mean, the list is pretty much endless. So that's the biggest thing about him that I think is probably going to determine the good Genjis from the great Genji players. It's going to be being able to get kills with it every time that thing's off cooldown, because it is just a very, very powerful tool.
Yeah, definitely get in there with that deflect. It's just a whole lot of fun to play as him. And so try out Genji and let us know what you guys think. So thank you all very much for listening. That was our character breakdown of Reaper and Genji. If you have any opinions, any feedback, maybe we missed something, maybe you have an interesting story you'd like to share about any of these characters, please make sure to leave comments and your feedback. And Jeff, do you want to give some of our pages and some of our social media links so they can kind of respond and give us some of their info too?
Yeah, absolutely. Please check out our website, oppodcast.com. Please subscribe to the podcast. We're now on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play Music, so you can subscribe and leave reviews there. And let us know if there's anything we missed, if you disagree with any of our opinions on these characters, or if there's any other characters you'd like us to break down next. It's not a set list, so we are open to suggestion in the order we do them. So let us know if you have one you want to hear about.
For sure, absolutely. And once again, thank you guys so much for listening. This has been the OP Overwatch Podcast, and we'll catch you next time.